Welcome to this National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. My name is Mary Wells, and I have the great privilege of being the Dean of Engineering here at the University of Waterloo. 31 years ago, on December 6th, 14 young women were murdered at École Polytechnique in Montreal. We come together to remember and honor them and to reflect on our continued work ahead. As we begin today's event, we acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. It is my pleasure to introduce Jean Becker, Senior Director, Indigenous Initiatives and Interim Associate Vice President, Human Rights, Equity and Inclusion, University of Waterloo, to deliver a prayer.
Thank you, Mary. Bojo, Sego, Wache, Tanzi, Kwe. Mino Pamatsi, Aki, Dejnakas, Mikanak Dodam, Wawashkasheo Gipchita, Natasana no Nutsiavot Dunjiba. Hello, everybody. I first spoke at one of these memorials on December the 6th in 1990 as a student at the University of Guelph. That year, we were still in shock following the massacre at L'École Polytechnique the year before. That year, in 1990, I spoke about missing and murdered Indigenous women. 16 years later, on September the 1st, 2016, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry commenced. The final report was issued on June the 4th, 2019. The inquiry found that Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered or to go missing than members of any other demographic group in Canada, and 16 times more likely to be slain or to disappear than white women. As we begin this day of remembrance, please join me in recognizing the women who have and continue to suffer violence and injustice throughout the world by giving thanks for all of creation. Ujo Nashomsak Nokamasak. Greetings, grandfathers and grandmothers. Ichimegwech Ijemanado. We give thanks to all of creation for earth, air, fire, and water, those things that sustain our lives. We give thanks to our mother, the earth, who nurtures and nourishes us for all of our days. Thanks to the grandfather sun for light, warmth, and energy. To Grandmother Moon and the stars who light our way in the darkness. And we give thanks to all of our relations here on the earth, the stone people, the green ones, swimmers, crawlers, flyers, and the four-leggeds. And we ask that all those who suffer loss and hurt receive the comfort and the help that they need. Ichimegwech Ijemanado. Ichimegwech.
Thank you, Jean, for joining us today. This year, the University of Waterloo is proud to partner with the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter of the Canadian Federation of University Women to host a single, community-wide virtual event. This is a very personal story for me. I grew up in Montreal, attended McGill University, and graduated with a degree in metallurgical engineering in 1987, 2 years before the Montreal massacre at École Polytechnique. 12 of the 14 women murdered were engineering students, most of them in their final year of study, and would have graduated in May 1990. These women were my peers and colleagues, and would be about my age today had they lived. As engineers, we lost some of our future colleagues, along with the insight creativity, and passion they would have brought to our profession. You will notice the white ribbon that our speakers are wearing today. The White Ribbon campaign was started in 1991 to challenge and support all men and boys to be part of the solution in ending gender-based violence. The campaign has since spread to over 60 countries around the world. The white ribbons are a powerful reminder that we all men and all women, have an obligation to build a shared future without gender-based violence. It is my pleasure to introduce Anita Davis, President of the Canadian Federation of University Women, Kitchener-Waterloo.
Mary, thank you for your important message. The Canadian Federation of University Women, Kitchener-Waterloo, is pleased to partner with the University of Waterloo to bring this important commemoration to life. CFUW-KW was established during the aftermath of World War I. Throughout its history, the club has remained steadfast to its original mission, to promote equality, social justice, fellowship and lifelong learning for women and girls, and provide bursaries and scholarships to support the advancement of women in higher education. CFUW has continued to advocate for women's rights and improve their status in society. And yet, the safety and security of women in Canada and around the world continues to be threatened by violence that is systemic in our society. Tragically, despite increased awareness, statistics indicate that gender-based violence has escalated worldwide during the COVID-19 pandemic by over 40%. Today, we remember the 14 young women who were murdered 31 years ago at the École Polytechnique in Montreal, knowing that in doing so, we continue to also raise awareness of the ongoing reality of violence against women and girls. We also remain vigilant to the realities of the murdered and missing Indigenous women in our country. On this National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, vigils such as this, which are being held across the country, serve to remind us that we must continue to raise awareness, seek societal change, improve education, and enforce legislation. I wish to thank all of you for attending and being part of the conversation to help end gendered violence. I am pleased to now welcome and introduce the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Waterloo, Feridun Hamdullopour.
Thank you, Anita. 31 years ago, Canada changed. Today we remember the 14 young women who were murdered at École Polytechnique de Montréal. We remember the tragedy, the emotions, and the disbelief of that dark moment in Canadian history that continues to this day. No matter what, we remember the loss of these women who were targeted and killed simply for identifying as women. Their promising young lives cut short. Lives, love and expertise that Canada lost. This act of gender-based violence reverberated across our nation and into every post-secondary institution. The majority of students at the University of Waterloo today were not alive to hear the news that came out of Montreal, but so many in our community were. We remember gathering with our friends, colleagues, and family members, listening to the news over the radio or television with tears in our eyes, trying to comprehend the motives for this horrific act of violence. The shock of that day remains inside so many of us, but it also drove a determination to act and ensure another act of gender-based violence doesn't happen again. This is why the National Day of Remembrance and action on violence against women is so important to all of us. We mourn those killed and those wounded mentally and physically by the massacre. We do this to honor them, but also to never let the memory of this attack be lost from one generation to the next. The root of this evil and hate cannot be beaten through equal anger and hate. Only through constant discussions and education can we create lasting change, and change is a responsibility that we all have a role in playing, particularly those who identify as men. Gender-based violence is not a women's issue in our society. Men must take action against toxic masculinity that breeds violence towards women, and we must also listen and support women every step of the way. We cannot hesitate to help and support those who identify as women across our nation, particularly Indigenous women who have been targeted simply because of their gender and background. This cannot stand in a society that seeks to be safe and just. I urge everyone to take a moment today to remember the 14 young women who were taken from us 31 years ago. But more importantly, today is also about taking action. Action against gender-based violence, hate, discrimination, and apathy. We must bring light to the darkness of hate and intolerance. And we must not hesitate to fight prejudice with love, acceptance, and community. I would like to now welcome Bardish Chagger, Member of Parliament, Waterloo, and Catherine Fife, Member of Provincial Parliament, Waterloo, who have some remarks to share.
Today we mourn the loss of the 14 women whose lives were brutally taken far too soon. December 6, 1989 is etched in Canadian history as the day 14 female students were brutally killed for being women in a place where all students were supposed to have the freedom to learn and be safe. This was a hate crime, and the cause, misogyny. On the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, we continue to have to acknowledge that violence against women and girls continues to happen across Canada every single day. On this day, reflect on the troubling fact that for women, girls, and LGBTQ2 individuals, violence remains a reality. In fact, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it has worsened. To all women and girls, please know that you are not alone. There are services available for you, your loved ones, in our community. I know it's hard, but it's okay to ask for help. To the entire human race, all of us, we have a responsibility to consider concrete actions to eliminate violence in all of its forms, especially against segments of our society whom are underrepresented and underserved, namely women, girls, Indigenous, and LGBTQ2 individuals. We all can take action. We can listen and believe survivors. We can speak up against gender-based violence in all of its forms. Together, we can work to make our communities safer. As we build back even better and consciously more inclusive, let's remember that everyone deserves to feel safe, to be their authentic selves, and free to realize their potential. On the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, we remember the victims, commemorate the lives of all women who have experienced gender-based violence, and commit to take action.
Hello, my name is Catherine Fife, and I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for the riding of Waterloo. I want to thank the University of Waterloo and the Canadian Federation of University Women for inviting me to share a few words with you today. On December 6th, 31 years ago, 14 women were killed at École Polytechnique in Montreal, a school much like the University of Waterloo. It was a day that shocked the nation. These women were killed because they were intelligent and they dared to achieve. The crime was motivated by hate and misogyny, which women in institutions everywhere are still experiencing today, 31 years later. Today, our academic institutions are filled with young women with bright futures. We have come very far, but many women in Ontario and Canada still face many barriers. Let us remember to not only continue shattering glass ceilings, but leave the ladder up for the women behind us. Let us also honor these 14 women each and every day by supporting each other and by fighting for equity and equality. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers today. It is our tradition to have 14 female engineering students light a candle honoring each of the women who lost their lives at l'École Polytechnique de Montréal. The vigil will be followed by a moment of silence in honor of the women who lost their lives.
Barbara Klotzanek-Vidajovic, nursing student, age 31.
Annie Turcott, materials engineering student, age 21.
Madhavia Nick, materials engineering student, age 29.
Anne Marie Edward, chemical engineering, 21.
Sonia Pelletier, mechanical engineering, 28.
Geneviève Bergeron, civil engineering student, age 21.
Maurice Leclerc, materials engineering student, age 23.
Natalie Croteau, mechanical engineering student, age 23.
Annie St. Arnaud, mechanical engineering student, age 23.
Helen Colgan, mechanical engineering student, age 23.
Michelle Richau, materials engineering student, age 21.
Anne-Marie Lemay, mechanical engineering student, age 21.
Barbara Dejanat, mechanical engineering student, age 22.
Maryse Lagarnière, budget clerk, École Polytechnique, 25.
In addition to the loss of the women, many other people, both men and women, were forever impacted by this event, including the injured, those traumatized, suicide victims, and friends and family. We remember all impacted today.
We light this candle in memory of all victims of gender-based violence, including those of murdered and missing Indigenous women. We honor and remember you.
Thank you for observing the moment of silence. While we pay our respects to the past, we must acknowledge there is still work to be done to end gender-based violence. It is now my pleasure to welcome Sarah Castleman, Executive Director, Sexual Assault Support Center, to bring some remarks.
Thanks so much, Mary, and to everyone at the University of Waterloo and in the community for joining in these collaborative efforts today. We're stronger together, and that feels more important this year than ever before. December 6, 1989, in 22 minutes, 27 people were shot and 14 women were killed by a gunman roaming the halls of Montreal's École Polytechnique. He separated men from women, and before opening fire on a classroom full of female engineering students, he screamed, "I hate feminists." In his suicide note, the gunman made his misogynist feelings towards women, feminists, and women in roles traditionally held by men very clear. Almost immediately, this became a galvanizing moment in Canadian history where mourning turned into outrage about violence against women. On this anniversary each year, as a nation and as a community, we gather. We gather because we know that his acts are reflected in the acts of domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual exploitation, and harassment of women in our communities today. We know that violence against any marginalized community, be it the BIPOC community or the rainbow community or women, reflects societal attitudes about them. And gender violence is a very real issue in our community today. Waterloo Regional Police respond to a domestic violence call every 1 hour and 30 minutes, and these numbers are growing with the pandemic. Over the last few years, the Sexual Assault Support Center has averaged 140 survivors on our waiting list. In our anti-human trafficking program alone, in the last 6 months, we've served 103 people in our community, the vast majority of them very young women. So I ask, how are you living out your values? Are you amplifying the voices of survivors and believing them, especially the most marginalized amongst us? Are you raising the issues raised by our community-based organizations doing this work? Are you donating to them? Are you voting in political leaders at every level of government that prioritize this issue? Are you raising your sons to treat women with fairness, equality, and respect? And are you working towards women's full participation in society, be it in politics, in higher education, or policing? We know that a power imbalance between men and women is directly related to violence against women, and addressing this inequity will actually have an impact of reducing all gender-based violence. If the Me Too movement taught us anything, it's that social change is possible. To borrow a phrase from Greta Thunberg, and I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. Today, what we need more than hope is action. Then and only then, hope will come. We've come a long way over the last 31 years, but there's so much more that needs to be done. That's why we're standing together as a community and a nation today, because together we can make real change moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for joining us today and for your message of hope. And thank you to all of our speakers today. I would also like to say thank you for everyone who is tuned in today to watch this event, and for never forgetting these 14 women, and for taking individual and collective action to end gender-based violence. Thank you and goodbye.